Thanks for having us here. I just wanted to kick off this session by saying, let's just step back a bit from science, from research. Let's take a step back and look at citizen science. Does anyone know what citizen science is, what it means? Show of hands, anyone? A couple of you. Okay. Specifically, we are looking at water quality and citizen science as part of this project and other projects that are leading from this. I'm sure some of you will have heard of Mini-SASS, Clarity Tube. Yes. So these tools are slowly getting better known. What we need to do is to try and use them to consolidate democracy in South Africa. So it's as what Faye was saying in terms of bringing them to civil society, getting civil society involved. This has an enormous potential to enhance water quality management, to give people the practical and accessible tools of science. These tools are easy to use, and yet they provide rigorous scientific data. There are initiatives such as the EnviroChamps and Adopt a River, which have been used. And these kind of initiatives change the face of science and change conservation practice. So what do we need to do? We need to equip communities with these tools. As part of a WRC project, a number of tools were developed. As I mentioned, the Clarity Tube and Mini-SASS being two key tools for water quality. To do this, it would mean to instill a sense of advocacy and ownership with your ordinary citizens. The outcomes, managers and conservationists on the ground get much better support, freshwater resources are safeguarded, and we get this idea of a shared language and common goals. So moving over to this concept of scaling, we have these tools, they work well. Now what? So if you think of scaling, people often, even in research, people mention upscaling, this notion of making things bigger and better. I think we just got to be cautious that bigger and better is not always the best route. What we're looking at here is scaling in along different axes, but the focus is on quality, not quantity. So we can look at scaling in terms of geography, in terms of the depth of coverage, the diversity of activities, the range of stakeholders. As I mentioned, the range of stakeholders within civil society, the private sector, government, non-government, and then application of the innovations. Just to give you an idea, some of you may have seen these images Mark has presented before, but this is the map showing the spatial distribution of South African schools in relation to rivers. So all those tiny green dots is a school close to a river. So you get an idea of how many schools there are. This is just schools. Zooming in, you'll see that there's a lot of schools in relation to the rivers. If we had to look at 100 schools, just 100 schools monitoring water quality, you'll see the green dots there starting to come up. If we took eco schools, just over 1,000, the green dots start to fill in the gaps. If only 50%, just half, of all South African schools do water quality monitoring, that's how much monitoring would take place in South Africa. Now that's just schools. That's not NGOs, that's not enthusiastic conservation groups. The way forward, in terms of a new scaling project that started last year, trying to look at integrating these tools in a broader way. What we're looking at now is how can we develop large national funding and resources for these processes? How do we sustainably resource and institutionally embed? How do we make these tools part of curricula, part of school learning, part of, you know, if you go on a course in the holiday, if you're an interested person in conservation, if you can go to your local museum and learn how to use citizen science tools. Citizen science tools also can be across the board in different landscapes, not just water, I'm sure you all know. How do we raise the profile of citizen-based water quality monitoring? How do we make it important? Because it is so important. Going to the Sustainable Development Goals, clean water and sanitation. It's a major, major issue. And many of the other Sustainable Development Goals cannot be achieved without this goal being achieved. The challenges, there's disconnection, as I said, between civil society and water resource management. I think most of you know about that. The disconnect is huge. Only 47% of South African rivers have good water quality. The rest are very poor. And it's apparently the monitoring is declining. So there's less and less capacity for government and municipalities to monitor. There's also a lack of platforms. Oops. So in terms of the challenges in South Africa, the national water quality monitoring programs are not functional, or they're functioning poorly. So there's this necessity to bridge the stakeholder divide. Looking at a bit more detail in terms of clean water and sanitation, SDG 6, our focus here is on water quality. So that's target 6.3, better water quality. So it's proportion of bodies of water that comply to South African water quality objectives. And the second one is 6B, local participation. Those two really link up strongly with citizen science and water resource management. There are a number of other targets which feed into what we do: integrated water management, protection of ecosystems. But just looking at those, this is the focus of citizen science, is to support and strengthen the participation of local communities to improve water and sanitation management. So in 2019, recently, the statistics report on the SDGs commented that South Africans' water reporting ability on this indicator, 6.3.2D, is really reduced because there's no data. There's limited monitoring, there's a lack of funding, there's lack of capacity, there's poor coordination. All these things are coming out. And basically since 2015, it's been said that water quality monitoring is declining. The United Nations have defined 5 sampling techniques for each country in the world to use in terms of water quality. So that's phosphorus, pH, salts, and dissolved oxygen. But what is not being looked at is biomonitoring, which is a key tool. So in fact, the UN have inquired about using Mini-SASS on a worldwide scale. And this is huge. The implications of this is huge. This is a tool used by kids in schools, and yet it provides great data. If we just had to look at the left-hand map, that's a recent clip of from the Mini-SASS website in terms of the monitoring that's taken place just in and around our area. Just imagine if every school in South Africa was doing that, the amount of data that we could use. Thanks.